What's up, guys? Amster Nose Hoops back today with the big project I've sort of been teasing at in all of my recent videos. Instead of me sitting here and rambling and power ranking all 30 teams, I think it would be better content if I got 30 different content creators who cover one specific team, all onto the show. And that way, one, I can help grow their platform, they can help grow my platform, and ultimately we show how beautiful of a place the NBA community can be on YouTube. Instead of everyone being so nervous and fixated on competition, and if I help someone, they're going to bring me down or bring them up. This community is so big, and honestly, all of us helping each other will only help the space grow. So send this to your favorite content creators. Again, as long as you're not one of the following 5 teams where I've already done your interview: the Nets, the Wizards, the Pistons, the Trailblazers, the Hornets, anything else, and the Heat. Anything else is free game. So send this to your favorite content creators. Send it their way. I will be there. Send them my way, or I'll go to them. But I want to make this happen. So guys, there will be, hopefully by Sunday, if not Monday, I will upload the 4 other interviews each day of that week. Hopefully in that time I will have conducted the next 5 I need to do and kind of just keep it going. The other series are not canceled or paused. It's just, this is a huge project and I know this can achieve something special. So again, send this out. Don't forget to leave a like, comment, subscribe. We're almost to 900 subs. It means the world to me, you guys. I hope you enjoy this upcoming Nets interview. Have a good one, guys. Hope you enjoy it. Peace out. All right, guys. So today I have Doug Norrie of the Locked On Nets podcast here today to discuss his Brooklyn Nets, get into the offseason, talk about, hopes, expectations, what we consider a failure, and just have all sorts of questions. Doug, would you like to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, Doug Norrie, Locked On Nets, co-host with Adam Armbrecht, been on the Locked On Podcast Network for, 4 or 5 years at this point, been talking Nets for 6 or 7 years. So happy to chop it up however you want to take it. I can take the Brooklyn Nets situation any number of different ways.
Of course. So I want to start with the first thing. So obviously this Nets team is not expected to be some team that wins 40, 50 games. So for you, what is determined as a successful season for the Brooklyn Nets?
Well, considering they had the lowest projected win total in the league at 19.5, if they won 40 games, I would say something crazy, happened, which I'm not even sure what that would be. Clearly their motivations this year are totally different than other seasons. They want to lose. They are going to try to get the best odds for the number 1 overall pick, which, as we know, in the current NBA landscape, is those odds are smoothed out a little bit more than they used to be. So, being the worst doesn't get you as much as it used to in the past, but it gets you a lot. So actually a successful season for them in a weird way. And unfortunately, this is how the NBA is sort of structured, is the losing as much as possible while also trying to develop players. So they really, it would feel like a failure almost if they didn't walk away with like the best overall odds to possibly land Cooper Flag with the number 1 overall pick. So I kind of look at success in those terms, which is weird to say when you're a sports fan because it kind of sucks to root for losing. But we didn't make the rules about how these things kind of get turned around with the drafts. So I think that's probably the best case scenario. And I think I speak for a lot of Nets fans out there when they say they're in on that idea, as such as it is.
No, I mean, I understand that for sure, especially because I remember distinctly when you guys had done your trades with KD and Kyrie and you had moved them on. And I remember the KD trade I loved for you guys because I was like, okay, this makes a lot of sense. I didn't get for you guys when you moved Kyrie, because moving Kyrie and then you guys got a bunch of like win now guys as if KD was going to stay there and you're going to play around him. I was like, so wait, so KD's staying and then you guys move KD. So then I was like, whoa, so where are the young pieces? Where are we? But I will say, do you think Joe Tsai redeemed the view of him with the Mikal Bridges trade, being able to pull 4 to 5 first-round picks for someone like Mikal, considering, all the rumors and reports up to that point was that he was rejecting deals for even like 3 first-rounders to walk away with 4 or 5 in pick swaps. What do you think about that?
Yeah, so just to rewind back to the Durant trade, I think that, with the Kyrie thing, they were sort of pot stuck a little bit on him. I know it's easy to kind of forget now, but like that, it's not like there was tons of suitors around the league, just like piling up phone calls around who they could trade for. He redeemed himself a lot this season, or he had like not redeemed. He had a bounce back season in terms of the narrative landscape, but I don't think there was like, I mean, maybe they just didn't do the Lakers deal because they didn't want to do business with LA. But I think that deal, I think it was kind of hard with the Kyrie thing. In terms of Sean Marks and Joe Tsai, kind of I'm Adam and I, my co-host, we've been
Mhm.
on this for a year around, and sometimes it's sort of a we took some heat for it, which was like we've been saying trade Bridges for a year. Now
Yep.
ours was usually around going to the Rockets because we thought it was um imperative that they get their own picks back. Like it didn't ever make sense to trade Mikal Bridges to like the Grizzlies, let's say, and then keep shipping picks off to the Rockets in perpetuity. I think that though that deal was always in conjunction. So I think maximizing, I would say max value on Mikal Bridges from another team. Like they got the universe conspired in one way, which was the Knicks. All of his friends played on the Knicks, and they were like a couple blocks away, and those guys have especially Brunson have enormous sway within the organization based on his dad, based on Leon Rose, like all this other stuff. So I think they extracted maximum value plus for the Bridges piece, and then timing it with swapping out the Suns picks for their own picks back. I thought it was just the perfect move, and that's not even revisionist a piece of it. Like Adam and I were begging for this forever, for saying there's just not good enough. They're not going to be good enough. They're not going to be able to put the pieces around. It's too fraught with peril. You're basically like hoping a guy like Giannis asks out, and then you hope at the same time that you have enough to trade for him. It's just too many. It's too many
No.
unknowns. So resetting the franchise in such a in such a distinct way, I thought was the perfect move. And it seems, I mean, if I can take the temperature of sort of like the fan base, most fans were pretty over the moon about it too. So I think that it was, to me, just like kind of the perfect move for where they were.
No, it was. It absolutely was. And I agreed because I mean, Mikel got, I mean, listen, so I'm a Bulls fan. So I'm glad you guys
They're the
moved on.
opposite.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm glad you guys got to move on from your incredible small forward when his value was high.
Yeah.
We personally we got Chris Duarte, baby. That's how we get DeMar DeRozan's value,
Well, it's funny about it. Sorry to interrupt you, but I just want just to say one thing about that. Like actually, I just used the Bulls as the example for sort of like where you don't want to be with waiting too
Hmm.
long with these kinds of things. And it was like they're the they're the perfect like sort of the perfect counterpoint to why you don't wait. It's like you have to see the writing on the wall early. You have to get out a year early, not a year late. They're a year late. They can't get rid of Levine. They can't trade Vooch. They're kind of stuck with these guys. They got one guy back for Caruso, right? Like they just, and all of a sudden you find, and now they're saying, oh, we're going to try to compete again, or or whatever. And so just none of it makes sense. It's just too hard. It's too hard to maintain them. It's too um it, it just gives you like too many negative outcomes to try to play to the middle for so long. So sorry to
No,
interrupt you, but I do think the
no,
Bulls
you're
are actually the perfect example of what you don't want to do in these situations.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. And that was the thing that used to bother me so much, especially with DeMar, because it was similar to Mikel, where his value was through the moon. It was like, he had those back to back game winners. The Bulls were the one seed for a little bit. I was like, man, here we go. We could trade him because I mean, hey, prayers up to Lonzo Ball, but his knee just, I don't know what happened, but we still don't really know. Um, but man, and then I wanted to ask you, what do you think about Cam Thomas? Because Cam Thomas is such a divisive player for guys. Because some people are like, this dude's just a walking bucket, and it's
Yeah.
incredible. But at the same time, it's like, is he anything else? Is there anything more to his game, or do you think that maybe with new coaching, Mikel being gone, you guys are firmly on the we're going to lose train? We'll see more from him.
It's really, if you walk in the net streets, you got to be really careful about what you say about Cam Thomas because, in a world, in an NBA landscape of stands that are out there, he easily has the most of like anybody on the Nets, right? There is a group of fans out there that think he is like a top 20 player in the league, which I think is probably, ridiculous. But you have to be really careful because if you try to couch any of your opinions in Cam Thomas by even making a player comp, you just get absolute fire rained at you. And then there's other people that just kind of don't that kind of say what you said before. So I think he's a pretty polarizing player. My feeling on him is he has in the NBA, you want to start by defining, like, does a guy have one core skill, right? Does he
Mhm.
have one core NBA skill? Like, you should go from there. So it's like, is it defense? Is it like just size, right? So I think size is a skill. Is it vision? Like, you have those things. I mean, Cam Thomas clearly has that in scoring. He has an NBA scoring skill. He was among the best per minute scorers on not horrible efficiency last season when given the time. So he can clearly score. The
Mhm.
the so I think from that standpoint, like, he should be playing every night. He should be starting. Like, he's a well above average player. They did a good job at where they got him at draft slot. The counterfactual is that there are limitations to his game that are going to make it harder, at least as he currently plays, to sort of like reach peak upside, which is he's not a great distributor and he's smaller. And when you're both of those things, it is actually pretty hard. There's not a lot of comps out there of smaller two guards who can play on really high level winning teams, because you have to be able to read and react and have really good court vision to be able to make up for your lack of size. And you're going to get hunted defensively, and that's going to be a problem too. So I think he's a very good player. If he makes a leap this season in terms of running high end pick and roll, being able to kind of see the court really well,
Mhm.
being able to not have size be a huge problem for him if he gets trapped. Like, we saw that before. Like, he's going to get probably blitzed a lot this season correctly, and he got better at that, but it wasn't perfect. Like, he needs to kind of he needs to step up in that piece of his game for me to really see the upside. That's my concern, is that, like, when you play his style, you for it to be really great, like, one other thing needs to come around. And I think he's just probably not there
Mhm.
yet. And for like a team where the Brooklyn Nets are, like, he's the perfect guy. He's going to be able to take a lot of shots. Hopefully Jordy Fernandez puts in a system that, like, helps to elevate some of those other pieces of his game. So anyway, I know I kind of towed the line here a little bit. Like Cam Thomas, you just got to be really careful. If you
No,
don't,
no. No, no. Listen. There's no towing the line here. For me, the whole reason I'm even doing this project is just to get the perspective of someone who watches this team so often to actually, understand, because for my content especially, I'm very much like over the league as a whole. So I'm trying to follow trends and all these things. So it's hard to then go, let me lock in on, one team and all their games or whatever. It's, impossible because you got to focus on all these different things. So I love the perspective that you and these other interviews have done. So I mean, no, I appreciate it. Don't even worry about towing the line or nothing. I mean, it's just your opinion, it's your thoughts, and that means a lot. Um, so I was going to ask you, right? So you moved on from Jock Vaughn, and now you have Fernandez. What do you think of him? And like, do you think he's going to be? Are you hoping that he's like not the long term coach, but like a Jamal Mosley, like he can bring in your culture and really change things? Or are you like, if the guys aren't really looking like they're developing a whole lot, maybe the leash isn't that long? Like, what do you feel?
yeah, I think for like where they are in their rebuild, he was
Hmm.
pretty much the perfect guy to bring in. I actually think they probably, when they interviewed guys like Kevin Young and when they interviewed guys like Mike Budenholzer and Jordy, who seemed to be like the three final guys, I think they probably, well, they did, because Fernandez mentioned this. I think they probably told them, hey, there's a chance we go rebuild on this thing. Like, it's not locked, but there's a chance. And I think that what Coach Bud said, I'm out on that. I'm not interested in doing that.
Right.
And then Young, I think, just had an opportunity at BYU, and he just kind of bounced on that. And I think Fernandez was probably like, hey, I can do either. I think for where they are now, it's always hard to judge assistant coaches because they haven't sat at the bench. Except for him, he's coaching Team Canada and he's done an awesome job there. And so I think
Hmm.
when you look at that and you say to yourself, okay, does he have like actual head coaching experience? Because sometimes it's moving one spot up the bench is really hard to evaluate. You don't. It's just that's a hard it's a really hard real time thing to
Oh
simulate,
yeah, for
right?
sure. Hmm.
And it's hard to simulate real time game reps, but he has that. Like, he's coached Team Canada. If you also read his background, I mean, the guy is an absolute grinder in terms of just like his story about coming up through the development stuff over in Europe and just absolutely grinding it to the nub is really promising for this kind of team. So I think two things. One, I think he's a good guy to bring in from like sort of a development and culture standpoint to be like, hey, we're gonna lose, but there's got to be a method to the madness.
Right.
Kind of probably what you saw in OKC with Dayton, where it was like, hey, we're gonna lose, but there's gonna be some core principles that we sort of stick to going forward because we're not gonna lose forever. That would be like the opposite than like say the Steven Silas approach, which was, hey, we'll roll the balls out and just kind of see what happens.
Yeah.
And so I think he's more of the former, just because like the Team Canada thing is just such a resume builder, and just his overall sort of attitude, I think, is really promising. So I think that the Nets have a good chance to be in just kind of the right place for a team that's going to try
Mhm.
to lose a lot of games, but maybe do so with a little pride. I think that's kind of important, and I think Fernandez kind of gives the chance for that to happen, probably more than a lot of other guys coming in.
No, yeah, for sure. I mean, I didn't even realize about the Team Canada thing. That's huge. I mean, because then you also have, he understands what it's like to be with all kinds of players because he has Shea on his team versus like a
Yeah.
Ludor or other kind of role guy. So he understands how to, you know, manage egos or whatever. And that's very interesting. I didn't even, okay. All right. Shout out to Fernandez, man. He's going to be doing something. But I was going to ask you too, is there any piece on the Nets right now that you're like going into next year? You're like, guys, look out. This dude is coming. Like he could do something for us. Like, obviously, again, trying to lose, but like he could be something that going forward, we have him on our squad and we like the look of him.
Yeah, the guy I would say fans and us are most excited about rightfully is probably Noah Clowney. Super young,
Mm.
came up last year when the Nets had raised the white flag and said we're just it's over. We're going to call the ball on this thing. We're not going to make the playoffs and let's just forget the rest, kind of tank the rest. They didn't get their own pick, but they kind of just gave up the rest of the season. He came up and played really really well. Super young, um, was a really raw prospect coming out, but did well at the G League and really show, when we talk about core NBA skills that you can flash early and sort of build off of, defense is clearly one for him. He's has a potential to be like sort of like an all NBA defender. Honestly, he's like that good. He's super rangy. He could probably step in and play some stretch four and play the five at times, especially if he bulks up. He can shoot the three, which the Nets have been desperate for. An actual sort of stretch big. They haven't had one forever. And they haven't had one since I've been covering the team. And so just having those things, I mean, his development with like as with bigs, it's always a little guard dependent because you have to have guards that can facilitate your ability to actually do the
Right.
things you do well, right? There's like not a lot of bigs that can just, like just even like very simple tenants like running just like pick and pop, pick
Yeah.
and roll stuff like that. Like you have to have a guard that can actually do it. Dennis Schroeder's like probably okay enough to do it, but in terms of just raw upside, he clearly has the most. He has the potential probably to be the he has the highest ceiling of the Nets. I think. Like I think his ceiling is higher than Cam Thomas's, just because I think he already projects to be an awesome defender. And if the offensive game comes around, which I think it will, like he's already shot the three ball okay at the NBA level, and just his overall sort of attitude about it, if you just like listen to interviews with him, I think actually he has the highest upside. I don't think it'll
Oh,
probably come all the way through this season, but that's I think the guy that you probably can get the most excited about currently.
oh, okay. I mean, yeah, I was about to say, I'm just looking now. I mean, the dude's he just turned 20. Like he's a very
Yeah, he's
young,
so
young
young.
guy.
Like he
So
can't. Yeah,
he's got time.
yeah, drafted when he was 19. And that's so funny too because we take a huge L on this because we were pretty against that. We wanted them to take a couple other guys in this range, and
Mhm.
we were kind of like, Clowney, because we watched a ton of tape on him, and I was like, I just don't see it. Right? That's my fault. But so I'm always willing to admit the losses here, but I was just wrong. Dead wrong about this. Like he totally stunk at summer league too. So we were like, oh god, what's going on here? But then he very quickly over the last 7 games was like really good. 30 minutes a game, 12 and 6, 47% from three. Like as a 19-year-old, that's very impressive for a guy his size, and just had some highlight reel defensive plays also. So a guy like if you pair him with Nick Claxton, I think in a 1 through 5 switching scheme, you have a potential to be like a really really high end defense.
Okay. So I was going to tell you too. So how did you feel about keeping Claxton? Because I know for a long time, the rumors were like Claxton might go, get paid, go somewhere else. Were you guys like super happy that you brought him back, or were you like, it's cool, but maybe he's not our guy to keep full time, long term?
It's funny. Had they gone keeping Bridges, shooting upside, I would have been actually pretty scared about this contract because he's just like not. I would have just been worried about paying sort of like maybe top dollar for his skill set,
Mm,
even though I think he's really good. I think that because they went a different route and you have to spend the money, this contract makes a lot of sense, right? He fits a switching scheme. He's a really good defender. He's improved every single year. Um, the contract's tradable if you decide to go to a different direction 2 years from now. So I think that that's probably totally fine. I'm fine with it. I would have been a little worried had they I would have been a little worried if this was the contract and they still had Bridges and the path was unclear because it would have just felt, I think, odd. But in terms of where they are now, he's still young enough to kind of track along a rebuild timeline. I'm kind of fine with it. Mostly, but I'm more fine with it because the expectations are lower this season. I like Claxton a lot. He's a really good defender, but there are limitations to his offensive game that would have made me a little worried about the number. But I'm just not worried about it because I'm not worried sort of like what the total wins and loss total is at the end of the season.
right. Okay. Yeah, I was gonna say I'm sure that definitely helps out in that trade, especially, basically finally confirming your direction, moving out of trying to be, middling and, oh, maybe we'll be the play in and maybe if we get lucky we'll be in the offs and you know, that's definitely good to hear. I was gonna ask you, so for you, you know, have you been watching summer league a lot? How much stock are
Yeah.
you putting into the stuff you're seeing from guys? And I mean, because we've seen a whole lot of ups and downs from all different kinds of prospects in the summer league this year already. So
Yeah, summer league is always a little tough to evaluate because I sometimes get more. Well, there's two evaluations I take from summer league usually, which are if you are a high draft pick and you're awesome, that's a really good sign. Like a Reed
mm,
Shepard, right? It's like okay, they got it. It's awesome, right? The Rockets hit on one here, so that's the one thing I'm like okay. The other stock I kind of put in is at the other end, which is if the expectations are higher and you're an on ball guard or wing and you're just not showing it all, then I actually get a little worried. I get less worried about bigs because they can't really control their fate as much in summer league. It's just too up and down the court. They need guard play. It's like if you can't create your own shot,
right.
then whatever. It's not going to be your fault too much. But if you're a guard or a wing and part of your game is going to be being on the ball and beating defenders and you're not doing it in summer league, then I actually do start to get a little worried. And so it's not the end of the world, but those are like the key things that I kind of take away from summer league. I try not to put too much stock in it because I think the competition is so low that it's just not always a good proxy for what's going to happen in the NBA, specifically about who's guarding you, right?
Right.
Like that's so this is all to say, yeah, we watched summer league. There's been a couple of nice takeaways for the Nets. Like Keon Johnson's been a nice. I think he actually might make the team because he's played pretty well. Jalen Wilson shot really well from three, which has been a nice carryover for what he did at the NBA level last year. So you like to see it. Dariq Whitehead, who they drafted last year, um, they drafted him and Clowney back to back. He was a project. He had been the number one overall high school prospect. Had a bunch of foot injuries. Went to Duke. It was not that great. Basically, had foot surgery again. Like he's been horrible. And those are the ones where I'm kind of like, man, this is tough because he's a guy who projects to be sort of an on-ball wing, maybe like a Jimmy Butler kind of guy.
Yeah, yeah.
Maybe that's not a great comp. But like anyway, he's like supposed to be, have some explosiveness, be able to beat some guys. The size and physicality is supposed to like sort of win the day. And he's been so bad. I mean, shooting like 10% from the field, like 9% from three. It's been so those are the kind of situations I get a little worried about, but he's still so young that I don't take away from it too. I mean, the Nets didn't have any draft picks this year, so that's the other thing where you're kind of evaluating sort of young journeymen or like late draft picks from other years. So not too many takeaways. Um, I mean, I love watching summer league, but the Nets weren't like they're not a huge summer league draw this season for a reason.
Right, right. And then, I've been starting to ask all my interviews this question because it's always interesting to see what does it take that your fan base has been having that you just sit there and you look at it and you go, what the hell are we talking about, guys?
Uh-huh.
Well, where is this coming from? Well, what are we doing?
Well, I don't know if it's a take that the fan base has. I mean, there have been takes in the past. This season's a little different because if the take in the past had been like stay the course and
Mhm.
let's put superstars around bridges, I was always a head scratcher to me. So but that one's kind of been washed away. The funny one, but there's so few people that land on this island now, which is like, everyone forgets we're how many minutes into this? We're 30 minutes away. You haven't even brought up, it's not your fault. You haven't brought up the guy who makes the most money on the team and Ben Simmons, right? The Nets are,
All
he's
right.
the most expensive. It's not your fault, by the way. Everyone forgets about him. We forget about him. We podcast about the Nets every single day of the week. And we just kind of like, we're just kind of like, there's been times where we'll go through whole scenarios and then we'll get to the end and say, oh, right, but Simmons is on the team and he makes $40+ million a year. Like, what's going on? So I think like it's not a fan take necessarily, but there is probably a small group out there still holding out a little hope that it comes back to even 80 to 75 to 80% of what he once was. I don't really
Mm.
see it. By the way, we were on the negative side of this last season where everyone was kind of penciling him in as a guy who was going to change the Nets short-term future. And we were always like, man, I don't know if it's coming back. Right. He's had so many injuries. There's he's sat out for non-basketball reasons, which I always think is the biggest red flag. No one ever wants to sort of put that on the resume, which I think is the most important part of the resume. That if
Mm.
you're willing to sit out for non-basketball reasons, that's way worse than sitting out for like injury
For
reasons.
injuries and stuff like that. Yeah.
Oh yeah, like if you're trying to if you go like by Bayesian, sort of like examining your priors around the predictive markets, you're like, hey, what should factor into my priors here? Oh, has a guy ever sat out because he just didn't want to play for a team? That's a huge mark against you. Huge.
Yeah.
It's the biggest. It's why the number should be really low about your predictive, analysis about how much a guy is going to play. So I think that he's still on the team. It's not necessarily it's not necessarily a sort of like cold take or whatever, but
Mm.
I just find it kind of hilarious that well, that's not hilarious. I find it interesting that we are now 3 years into the Simmons experience, and most people just don't even factor him as even being on the team, and he's easily the most expensive guy, which is like
Yeah.
I don't think you can find another NBA comp where that's the case.
Yeah, I'm about to say there aren't many. But I guess when you play as little games as he does, you kind
Yeah.
of you forget about it. So this is last year, isn't it, for you guys? I think. Like, is
Oh
this the
yeah,
last
yeah.
year of
They're
the
gonna
deal?
they're gonna probably well, I never thought he had any. I never thought they could trade him at all. There was folks that
No,
said,
yeah,
"Oh, an expiring contract has value," and I was like, "Well, I think we have different definitions of value. Value means something that's worth something. This is not one of those
no,
situations. So
yeah,
there's a world where they could get out of it. Like some team takes it at the trade deadline. I don't really see it, and I think they're just going to eat it and sit out the season. Now that they're tanking, it doesn't matter anymore. And so it was always going to be. This is the other problem that we always had with trying to get better. We've always thought it's going to be impossible. You can't get better when your most expensive guy doesn't play and stinks. This is impossible. Like you can't find an NBA situation where if your most expensive player doesn't play, you can't be good. It's impossible. The math just simply doesn't work. And so, yeah, so I think they're just gonna eat the contract, get to the end of the season, and that'll be the end of it.
yeah. That's what I would guess too. Just because I really can't imagine any other possibility unless he somehow comes out and is just like I don't know. It
Well,
would
it's
take
like a
yeah.
possibility. Going back. Sorry to interrupt you, but going back to
No,
the
you're good.
Bulls, like a possibility would be like I think the Bulls would do that trade for like Zach LaVine, right? I think the Bulls would
Mm,
say, "Oh, we'll take Simmons' contract. You get Zach LaVine back," but the Nets would say, "No, no, thanks. We don't want that.
yeah,
Like that contract is not as. It might be worse just because at least Simmons' contract ends." Right?
yeah.
And so I think that like there are teams that would say yes to it, but the Nets wouldn't say yes to to what was coming back. So I think the Bulls offer like sort of like a good example, but you just wouldn't want what you would get in return.
No, yeah. At this point, you might as well just let it end, move on, and you
Yes.
kind of bite your bullet. And then I have one last question. So obviously, success or failure for this team is not again record based. So what for you could be considered a disappointing season for this Nets team? Is it a development thing? Is it the coaching isn't as good as we thought it was going to be? Like, what for you is like this was a disappointing season for the Nets?
Yeah, it's funny. The disappointing season here would be somehow two things. Coming out of the season without top three in lottery odds would be disappointing.
Mm,
I think the whole reason you're doing this is to have a chance at Cooper Flag, have a chance at Ace Bailey, right? Dylan Harper, VJ Edgecombe, like there's some real dudes here that they could draft. So I think that not having at least the best chance at getting Cooper Flag would be disappointing, I think. The other one would just be getting through the trade deadline and still having Cam Johnson and Dorian Finney-Smith on the team and not having traded them for kind of anything at that point, I think would also represent a disappointment just because they just don't have a role. There's no future. Maybe another team sees value in them at some point as being able to have some play some playoff caliber minutes, and they just need to go. So I think if they made it through the trade deadline and those dudes were still on the team, I would be a head scratcher. Sean Marks has got a iffy track record with stuff like this. So I would represent. It's weird to think of those as disappointments, but I'd probably put those up as I would be a little annoyed if that happened.
No, I mean, that's definitely understandable because that was something I was thinking about asking you was like, because you still have some of those role guys that I think a lot of higher up teams would love to have. So I was kind of shocked that moves haven't been done for them yet. I know though, Cam Johnson, you guys paid a good amount for him from what I remember. That was a while ago. Goodness.
It's like 23 million. It's a declining number. I think that Sean Marks is this. Oh, sorry. Sean Marks's thing has been he's extracted like max value on guys like Katie and not Kyrie, Katie and Mikhail. Like he got, I would say, max value, but I think he's sort of used that same principle around some of these guys that you just can't get max value on, and they just hung on too long to them. So I think that's kind of maybe the case that's happened here is that he overvalues all of his guys or a lot of his guys, and sometimes that works out really, really well. And sometimes when you get sort of toward the middle of the NBA talent pool, it doesn't work out as well. So that's my uninformed take or unsourced take on like why I think some of these guys are still on the team.
Okay. And then we're just about to get to the end here. Doug, is there anything you want to tell the audience, the viewers, whatever?
Oh, I mean, I'm just, it's so funny it's so funny to root for a team to lose. It doesn't feel amazing. It feels like karmically, that's not a great thing to be in your life, to root for, actively root for a team to lose games. I feel like, karma doesn't pay that off well. And like I said before, I'm willing to do 5 days a week, and that's podcasting, and have them see like a 12 and 70 record at the end of the season would at least it's in the cards, and we're going to be here for it.
Okay. Doug, thank you again so much for your time. It really means a lot to me. Thank you so much for stopping by. Thank you.